I often hear this term, I want to be on the right side of history. Well, how about we just be right?
Midnight Ride.
Good afternoon, nation. This is the Midnight Ride coming at you. This is the magnificent Zev and the one and only Tony. Looking forward to discuss this week's many outrageous issues. Uh, we have a good show in store for you today as we talk about the tumultuous chaos that our country is experiencing right now. But first of all, let's see how our buddy Tony's doing today. How are you doing, Tony?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm about to feel a whole lot better once this podcast gets going. So the first topic that I kind of want to address is the Atlanta police officer shooting uh, involving an African American man who was apprehended in front of a Wendy's or in the parking lot of a Wendy's. At first, it seemed like a fairly relaxed shakedown where the police officer was talking to the African American man. And then when they tried to handcuff him behind his back, the African American man made a run for it. He did grab the taser of one of the cops. The second cop tried to tase down the African American man. Then the African American man tried to tase back. And then the white cop shot the African American man in the back. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Tony what his thoughts and feelings are about this issue.
Well, my thoughts and feelings are kind of similar to the George Floyd incident. I feel it's unfortunate that a life was lost as a result of police action. I'm always kind of cognizant to the idea that police are in a position of authority, they're in a position of power, and one singular black man does not, in this case, did not threaten really the lives of two police officers, despite him having a taser. So I feel it's unfortunate that this gentleman had to lose his life as a result of this, and a child lost, the father, or grew up the rest of their life without a father. So in essence, but from a kind of a practical point of view, I think that we really have to question whether these police officers, do they need to use the force that they need to use. And like I said before, in this case, it was two police officers against one man. And so we have to take that into consideration.
Yeah, this is a very sensitive issue. I think it's worth noting that regardless of how you feel, whether it's right or wrong, it is to be expected in this country anyway that as soon as you begin to fire back at a cop, there's a high likelihood you're probably going to get shot, even if it is a taser, because it is a projectile. And I think that this African American man, though I wouldn't say it was justified per se, I wouldn't make that claim, but it is perhaps inevitable that he met this demise because the second he started shooting back at the cop, what else could you expect? If he just made a run for it and they shot him in the back, then no question, his family would have a huge case. And it would show a lot of police incompetency because they're not supposed to fire based off their protocol just because someone's running away. But since he had shot back at them, it seemed like it was basically a long time coming.
Yeah, maybe so, but like I said before, a taser, from my understanding, is a one shot projectile, and I didn't see from the video whether he actually hit the officer or whatever. But if the taser was fired and it missed, in my opinion, I don't see a reason for why they would need to use police force if it is a one shot projectile. Imagine this in your head. You shoot a taser, it's done. You can't retract it back in and shoot it again, without it being charged, right? So in this case, he did not have any deadly weapons after the first shot was fired. And we have to think about, was that appropriate use of force if the gentleman did not have a deadly weapon after he had shot the taser.
Well, another thing to consider too, Tony, is when you see the video, the individual African American man, I don't know his name offhand, but he didn't start to struggle until the handcuffs were on his, well, were being, put behind his back around his hands. And so he was already kind of in a position of weakness, but he broke free from that position and he was able to overtake two cops that were trying to keep him down. And you could also make an argument that these two cops didn't show enough, physical qualifications because they weren't able to keep the man down. Once they should have had him on the ground. Like they already had him in a position that was uncompromising. I'm assuming from the African American standpoint, he probably had the concern after seeing the George Floyd video that he was going to get the knee to his neck. But to me, it is pretty stifling. It's pretty shocking that he was able to break free from a position where he was already semi-chained up, and he was able to get both of them off his back, one versus two, and these are supposed to be trained physical cops. And the fact they allowed him to get away, in the first place is kind of a question of competence.
Yeah, I mean, competence, readiness to do the job. I don't think that there was a lack of resources here. I mean,
Yeah,
so we can't make that as an excuse. I think that all in all, I mean, I think that there were definitely wrong steps taken at every level to end up with this conclusion. But once again, we have to think of police officers. They are in a position of authority and they're in a position of power, and whenever you are given that authority and given that power, you have great responsibility.
With great power comes great responsibility.
And so we need to think about, did they use the tools that were available to them the right way, in accordance with the scenario that came up.
And I tell you one other comment on this before we switch topics. I remember the white police officer saying that the African American man needs to stop fighting. You remember that part? He said, "Stop fighting, stop fighting." Okay, and I think that you could kind of sense that they were nervous that something ultimately was going to happen that would incriminate them, which ended up, the prophecy ended up being fulfilled of that. And you could, again, I'm no psychologist, but you almost could sense the paranoia that these two guys knew they were stepping into something big. And, and I think that it's worth mentioning that they probably, and of course it's hard to put ourselves in their shoes, but telling the guy to stop fighting after he's engaged in physical combat is not going to suppress him. And I almost kind of feel like if they had taken more mental and physical energy on keeping him down, as opposed to being afraid of what could possibly go wrong, we may have had a better turnout. So long story short, it just seems like police officers have to take a responsibility, though they're under a tremendous amount of pressure, just because, one step in the wrong direction could lead to, persecution or the end of a career. They still have to take the accountability because that comes with the job. Then again, I can understand their paranoia. In the actual aftermath, the Atlanta mayor called for their firing. Their police chief resigned. They did not receive a thorough criminal investigation. And now you have the officer that shot the gun, fired the bullet, facing a felony murder charge. And, it happened so quick. And you even have a situation now where that officer's stepmother was fired from her workplace. And when they inquired as to why, the company responded back to the journalist telling them that there was some social media communication they didn't like and didn't give a very, fully fleshed out answer. So, it's sad that that paranoia cloud has to loom over them. But despite that, they have to fight through it if they're going to live up to their responsibility. Okay, our next topic is going to be CHOP, C-H-O-P, the region in Seattle that's designated as the no police zone. Tony, from what I've seen, it looks like absolute bedlam. It looks like, modern day Sodom and Gomorrah, chaos. And, good old Tucker had a video on there, and it was this kind of like white, kind of like a techno Viking. You remember that video back in the day? Techno Viking kind of guy, all like, barred out, and he was just dancing in the middle of the street. And definitely seems to be predominantly white folk that are in CHOP. And just from what I've witnessed, through the video, it looks like that the inmates have taken over the asylum, and it's weird to me that major news stations like CNN are kind of glorifying CHOP. They're saying, "Oh, this looks like a music festival," or this looks like a fun fair. And you hear people, like accounts of people that live in the area, and they hear like screaming, and they hear like like all these sounds of fear, and people getting attacked. And would you like to move to CHOP, Tony?
No, I will not be moving there. I do not support lawlessness and anarchy to this level. I think that we all should have personal responsibility, accountability for ourselves, but I think that this is what society begins to look like without law and order. And I think that we need our local officials, we need our leaders to step up and to create an adequate response to this scenario that's going on, and not allow it to continue to run as a charade. And unfortunately, the media is glorifying this. The liberals are glorifying this, and it's not something to be celebrated. I mean, you have people within this area that are in danger. They could be in harm's way, and it's lawlessness.
I tell you, did you see the interview? This is probably a week or so ago, where they asked the governor of Washington what he thought about CHOP, or Chad at the time. And do you know what he said?
He said he didn't know about it.
He didn't know about it.
Yeah.
And I tell you, man, these governors and mayors in particular, they really need to step up, and they need to quit playing the narrative. Just hoping that Sleepy Joe Biden will give them a VP pick, and they need to actually put their foot down and protect their area, protect their turf. And everything I've witnessed with this CHOP region, I just sit there and it baffles me. And I think that if we were to extend, I know that the perimeter was shrunk over a deal that was made. I think it was earlier this morning from like maybe 7 blocks to 3 blocks. Did you hear about that?
No.
But I mean, just imagine if the entirety of the city, and Seattle's a major city, and this is very close to downtown. And I know that they took over a police station, they took over City Hall. And if this had happened to my city, I would be, I'd be trying to purchase my ticket to Canada. I'd be trying to get out because I mean it's a scourge of anarchy. You have any other thoughts on that, Tony?
No, I mean I think that it's pretty self-evident. I think that our politicians, as I said before, I think that government should, if they are going to get involved, they should, punish the people that are doing wrong, and get out of the way of the people that are doing right. So.
Yeah, and I tell you, go ahead.
Okay.
No, I mean it's like I've talked before about how society always celebrates the whiners, but in this case they're celebrating the losers. I mean these are the goons. These are the goons of Baskerville. I mean, I tell you what, like I'm sure. I mean, I would wager, I would place a bet that maybe 1 out of 200 people in CHOP have any kind of advanced education. I mean, to me, it's like all the homeless, the lawlessness, the real deplorables, the real deplorables of society. It's like a Wild West town taken over by the bandits. And anyway, okay, our next topic is going to be J.K. Rowling. You want to do this one? What do you think?
That's up to you.
All right, well, we can do it. So there was an article written that talked referring to menstruation, kind of an awkward topic for us men. I don't know about some of our listeners, but we as men, it's not really our forte, but that's okay. But basically, it was an article about menstruation and about people who menstruate. And J.K. Rowling said, I think they're trying to refer to women. So she's basically, trying to stand up for feminist principles that women should be acknowledged, for the experience they have, biologically in this case. And then some of these Hollywood liberal elites, like Daniel Radcliffe, who plays Harry Potter, also known as Harry Pothead, comes out and says that she's offended the transgender community. And, is he a transgender? Why does he care?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like my point on this. I'll kind of make it my only point is that, if you are liberal, you always have to keep in the back of your mind, there's always someone that is going to be more hardcore or more liberal or more, woke than you are.
Yeah.
All right. So, in this instance, J.K. Rowling thought that she was woke because she was a feminist and she got out woke by somebody else. And I'm sure that this Harry Potter guy, I'm sure that he will be out woke by somebody else, and it'll continue to move in the area until you get more and more extreme.
I think he needs to get on his broom and fly back to Hogwarts. And I said broom, and I think you know what I mean. All right. What else was I going to say? Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. You remember the scene where Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn are in the submarine and they're being chased by a large fish, and then an even larger fish comes out and eats that first fish? You remember what Qui-Gon Jinn says?
No.
There's always a bigger fish.
So I think the modern day representation, to make the connection, there's always a louder, nastier liberal. All right, so our next topic is going to be the Vermont principle. I'll let Tony kind of explain this one because it's a topic near and dear to his heart.
Oh, that's funny. All right, so there's a principal in Vermont, and she was accused of, being critical of the Black Lives Matter movement. Let's see here. All right. Okay, so there's this article about a Vermont principal for Windsor High School. Tiffany Riley was suspended this week for her comments in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement. And so her comments were the following. I'm going to read this to you. I firmly believe that Black Lives Matter, but I do not agree with the coercive measures taken to get to this point across, some of which are falsified in an attempt to prove a point. While I want to get behind Black Lives Matter, I do not think people should be made to feel they have to choose black race over human race. While I understand the urgency to feel compelled to advocate for black lives, what about our fellow law enforcement? What about all others who advocate for and demand equity for all? Just because I don't want to walk around with a Black Lives Matter sign should not mean that I am a racist. And so her principal responded with this after, supposedly letting her go. District Superintendent David Baker responded with the following. I feel like a post like that, with those kind of racial overtones and what I define as pretty much outright racist in my value system, she would have never posted that. And he goes on to say, the district, that we do not intend to hire her back. We want to make sure we acted as quickly as we possibly could. So to me, this is another incident, another piece of evidence of how only certain viewpoints are allowed. And unfortunately, this is making its way into our education system, which is to be expected. In many ways, we could say that what we see today is a product of our education system. But it is unfortunate that in this particular county, 96% of the people are white, and only 0.6% of the population is black. And so, it's unfortunate how we have these areas where, there's not a strand of Black Lives Matter in these areas.
There are no
right?
Black Lives to Matter.
Yeah.
They're not there.
So we have this occurring, And we still see the pattern of white guilt that we talked about a couple episodes ago.
I mean, my thing is like, if this is the superintendent, and he says that her comments are, what was it, indisputably racist? Was it something like that in their tone? Like, what could he be doing to bring more minorities to the community? If he truly did have a deep found conviction and truly an emotional attachment, to minorities in particular, black lives, then the statistics would suggest so. There would be more African American people in his school district. And to me, it just sounds like he's trying to, keep his political options open.
Definitely, it's all about politics. It's all about virtue signaling and trying to be correct rather than being right. Um, I often hear this term, I want to be on the right side of history. Well, how about we just be right, right?
Yeah, sure.
Rather than being on the right side of history.
Or, true to ourselves.
Yeah, because so much of what we see now is so subjective. It's always ever changing. There's no, idea of right and wrong anymore. Everything is so morally subjective, and there's so many gray areas now to where we can't even call right anymore and wrong wrong. And so we see this not, only in the school system, but we see this in social issues with the Supreme Court rulings. I'll let you get into that.
Okay, so we recently had a Supreme Court ruling, ruled 6-3. One vote, surprisingly, by Justice Neil Gorsuch. Did I say that right?
Neil Gorsuch, yeah.
Gorsuch. And this ruling was basically declaring that the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which says people cannot be discriminated based off of race, color, religion, they've added another nuance to it. And now people cannot be discriminated both working for a business and being served by a business off of sexual orientation, referring to the LGQ. Oh Lord, help me out. LBGQTA.
I have no clue.
The people of
the gay and lesbian.
Yeah, and the undecided. So some people are saying that this is disturbing because instead of ruling on the constitutionality of a law that was being debated at the Supreme Court level, they're beginning to legislate on their own. People see it as more than just interpreting the law, but creating new law. And the other concern there is that religious leaders will have their religion's First Amendment, right? Their First Amendment rights impeded upon, because now that they will have to push aside their religious beliefs on homosexuality and cater to people of the LGBQT.
Yeah, and this is this has been a problem in American history for a long time. Judicial activism, where we put judges on the bench and we give them full reign, and they serve for life. And rather than ruling on the constitutionality of the law, they use it as an opportunity to seek to level out balances, to level out inequalities that they see in the system. And so, unfortunately, though, I think that this ruling is going to further devolve America into Armageddon. I mean, the country as itself is quickly spiraling into a pit of darkness that unfortunately the country continues to stand for and champion for. I think it's one thing to allow, gay people to, to not be discriminated on or whatever else. But, in reality, people discriminate every day. And I think that business owners should be allowed to discriminate and hire whoever they want based upon whatever criteria that they want. And that's regardless of whether they're gay, red, blue, black, white, whether they're Republican, conservative, doesn't matter. If you're a business owner and you've taken the risk of opening a business, the financial risk of opening a business, You should be allowed to hire who you want based upon whatever criteria that you want. We should not be making special laws or making special Supreme Court rulings to fit a special class of people.
And I tell you what, I mean, they call it the private sector for a reason. It's meant to be private, and people's private best judgments were intended to, be the part of the business model of their business. That they could decide, who they want to hire and who they want to serve. And I agree with Tony, the one and only, that it is very frightening. And the thing that really brings my piss to a boil is that I've yet to see any kind of discrimination law against ideas. I had a great college professor once who told me that diversity was welcomed at the university and the secondary and primary education for everything but ideas. Everything but ideas. It could be race, it could be nationality, it could be gender identity, religion, but not ideas. Diversity was welcomed for anything but ideas. And I think that if the Supreme Court was serious about diversity and having a versatility and lifestyle and how the country is governed, then they would include something like that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Yeah.
Not maybe, for sure. What are your thoughts?
Like I said, I mean, I think that everyone should openly be allowed to discriminate. I think that if unfortunately, I think that this is how it's being foreseen in the media, and what it is it's a attack on traditional conservative values. Even more specifically, I'd say it's an attack on Christian values, because if we go back to the news story that occurred years ago about the baker and him being forced to bake the cake for the gay couple, no one really addressed the Islamic baker, who has to bake the cake for the religious couple. No one addressed the fact that, can we force an Islamic meat market to sell us, pig, steak or whatever else, right? So to me, it seems like more of an attack on traditional conservative values. And the Democrats, they love, the Islamic religion. They're went in bed with it.
Allegedly.
Yeah, and so to me it seems like they're okay with all other religious groups and etc., but they're not okay with Christian values, which once again this is not good for the country, because the country was built off of these values socially and morally.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's like they're running out of people to appease, right? I mean, first you have the women's rights movement, then you have the civil rights movement. And I, for one, though I believe that those things were necessary to make society more inclusive and more welcoming, I also believe that many of the politicians spearheading those things were just looking for voters. And then they started, defending Islam. But now, they've taken another step in defending the LGBQT at the expense of an Islamic baker, like you mentioned before.
Yeah.
So it feels like to me that they are basically catering to whatever particular group they think that they can win over next.
Yeah.
And tally up as many new votes as they can, even though they're pretty small sectors of the population.
And think about, from a religious standpoint, who does this really affect? I mean, it really affects Christianity. I mean, you're not going to have, gay, lesbian people going into a mosque demanding to get hired, But you will have some people, maybe some Antifa types, who will want to go into a Christian church or whatever, demanding that they get hired to prove a point. And I feel like this is, unfortunately, I feel like there's an evil intent behind this, and that, not all religions, so to speak, are being treated equal in this regard, and that it's specifically being targeted towards Christian churches and Christian schools and businesses.
Yeah, and it's bizarre to me. I've always been someone who's open-minded about unique lifestyles that I myself may not relate to. I wouldn't go so far as to say I agree or disagree with them, but I just may not relate to. I acknowledge that they're there. I respect them. But when you have new, unique, progressive lifestyles that are overriding, traditional lifestyles and perspectives at the point of making the tradition lose its capability to exist and lose its capability to be practiced, I think that is a very frustrating thing. I'll give you a J.R. Tolkien quote. Tony may recognize this because he's a big fantasy fan. The deep roots are not reached by the frost. Have you ever heard that before?
No, I haven't.
But I feel like in America, the frost of social change is slowly starting to kill the deep roots of tradition that helped found and maintain our nation. Our next topic is going to be Coach Gundy. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Mike Gundy from the University of Oklahoma State.
Don't get it mixed up with Gumby, the clay animation figure with the Pokey the horse. You know what I'm talking about?
No clue.
Gumby, with his pals, Pokey, Crickle, and Goo. He will walk through the wall if you want him to.
Tony's a Wallace and Gromit fan, so I was thinking maybe he would. But tell the nation about the issue, Tony.
So, as a football coach, Mike Gundy from University of Oklahoma State, he was caught wearing, in parentheses, wearing an OAN shirt, and this is what the news media considers to be a far-right organization, far-right Christian organization. And they are pro-Trump, so of course, this is no bueno. So one of the players on the team posted the coach with this shirt on. And keep in mind that from my understanding, the coach was not on office hours. This was, in his own time. Posted that he was displeased that the coach would wear such a shirt of an organization, and so the coach, just like we discussed with Drew Brees a couple of weeks ago, he bended the knee. He took the prayer, the vow of white guilt, and he submitted. And he, released this whole, video saying how he was sorry and he apologized, and he did disastrous things to his players by wearing this shirt.
He did not bend his knee to the flag, but he bent the knee to his pride.
So unfortunately, this is just another example of white guilt and not being able to stand for things that we believe. And why is it that we all have to kowtow and give in and conform to these ideas of these groups? And the loudest person is the one that we hear. And so, the players should be thankful that they're on the team.
That they've been given this opportunity.
That they've been given the opportunity for free, for free. And this is, the coach, he's done a great job at the university in terms of the football team, getting them ready to play. He's an alumni of the university. And so, unfortunately, alternative views are not allowed. If you don't fit that 3x5 note card of allowable opinion, like Tom Wood says, then it's not acceptable. So, I don't know if you have any comments.
I am sick and tired of people's actions not being considered as part of the equation. If this guy did not like black people, okay, if he did not like people of different races other than his own, then he would be in a different industry. He wouldn't be working with these people day in and day out. And on top of that, there's so many nuances to these issues, just like the Vermont principle we mentioned earlier. Like, people act as if Black Lives Matter, again, not the concept, but the organization. And as far as I'm concerned, this news station, what was it, ONA?
OAN?
OAN?
Or is it ONA? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I thought we were going to get some ad money from them. Maybe not now. But, I'm sure the news station was probably criticizing the organization anyway, not the concept of Black Lives Mattering. But it is just absolutely shocking to me. I mean, I'm appalled that this guy is basically implied to be a racist. And this player, This player who has an opportunity, he doesn't confront the coach like a man. He just tattletales on him. And and it's not like the Joe Paterno case. You remember the Joe Paterno case where like the coach needed to be told on because there was some weird kinky sex shit going on. But it was a deal where a guy was wearing a shirt on his off time that was linked to a conservative news station. And then people just assume he's a racist despite his actions. And I don't know. I could go on and on. But do you have any other thoughts about this, Tony?
No, let's move to the next topic.
All right, well, our next topic, which is not at all controversial, is going to be the banning of Aunt Jemima syrup and Uncle Ben. Is that rice? Is that Uncle Ben?
Yeah, Uncle Ben's rice.
Yeah. And this kind of harkens back to the days of Frito Bandito. You remember Frito Bandito? It was this Hispanic guy that wore a sombrero, and he liked to eat Fritos. And eventually people thought it was racial, and they got rid of it. But these are two characters, almost icons, if you will, that are being removed from the shelves at your local grocery store. So if you're anything like me, wanting to make an extra buck or keep the paraphernalia for history, then you might want to grab some before they're gone forever, just like Blockbuster. But Tony, what are your thoughts on Uncle can't remember his name, Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima?
Well, I mean, I think that these are great things because that it allows black faces to be on products and items. I mean, I don't know, if I was Black Lives Matter, I think it'd be great to have Aunt Jemima and Ben, Uncle Ben on there, and even more. You could go put Uncle Tom on something. I mean, the more black faces, I would think, if I was Black Lives Matter, that would be great. I mean, if Black Lives Matter, then the less black faces you see on products, you would think that would be the opposite of what they want. So, I don't know. Aunt Jemima has been around for a long time. It's been, great syrup that, a lot of people enjoy on their pancakes. I think it was a part of a movie, right, or play at some point in time.
Aunt Jemima?
Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean,
yeah.
So ingrained in the pop culture.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, this is just, and the thing is, I'm not even sure Black Lives Matter if this is what they wanted. I think that this was white liberals that demanded that these things be taken down. They went to Whole Foods and they saw Aunt Jemima, the organic version of Aunt Jemima, and they said, we have to take this down, right? So,
well, I tell you, it comes back to this idea that people are so afraid of being perceived as racist. It doesn't matter whether they have racism in their hearts. It doesn't matter if they think racist thoughts. All people are worried about is the perception. But I think that it could be one of the potential downfalls of this country, of this nation we share, if people go about their lives being afraid of their honest opinions that probably have nothing to do with race to begin with, being perceived as racist to the point that they just don't share their thoughts or feelings anymore.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, it's sad. I mean, what else do we take down? I mean, did we get rid of Uncle Tom's Cabin, the book? Do we get rid of To Kill a Mockingbird? Do we burn the books?
Do we kill To Kill a Mockingbird?
Yeah, where does it end? And this is the very dangerous thing, and that's why I think the ultimate goal of this isn't really like a racial narrative, so to speak, but it's a takeover. It's a communist socialist takeover.
It's a coup.
And they want all voices to be silenced other than their opinion, their viewpoint, and they want to take over all major institutions in society. And ultimately, that is what Antifa, Black Lives Matter, the Democrat Party, parts of the Republican Party, and other kind of groups out there, that's ultimately what they want.
Yeah, and I'm picking up on those same themes. Another Star Wars quote. What does the princess say when Palpatine rises to power? Do you remember?
Uh-uh.
So this is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
I feel like that roaring applause is taking place right now. Stay safe, nation. Tony, got anything else to say?
No, that's it. Stay safe. That's it.
And your support of Midnight Ride matters.